Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well. My name is Harsha, and I would be the moderator for today's exciting event. I would like to thank you all for taking out the time and attending the Power Hour session hosted by Harbinjar. For those who are joining us for the first time, Power Hour is a series of roundtable discussions amongst industry stalwarts where they would be sharing their ideas, insights, and experiences on a particular topic. The topic for today's discussion would be Future of Education, Connecting the Dots Between Education and Employment. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping tips. Ensure that you have selected the right speaker for the audio output. Test your speaker to check if it is working fine from the audio setting options at the lower level left corner of your screen. If necessary, dial in using a phone. With that, now it's the time for introduction. Our host for today's roundtable discussion is Rahul Singh. Rahul is a digital learning enthusiast and is passionate about helping organizations and leaders solve challenges around the learner engagement and student outcomes through intervention of learning technologies. In a career span of over 15 years, he has helped a lot of organizations and educational institutions with implementing new strategies and initiatives around the digital learning programs. We welcome you, Rahul, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Harsha. Thank you for the introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the audience who have joined us today from different parts of the world. We want this to be an interactive session, so at any point of time, if you have any thoughts or questions, we would encourage you to type it in the chat box. And I, along with the panelists for today, will take turns to answer those questions and share our thoughts on those. Primarily, we'll try to keep this discussion for 45 minutes, and the last 15 minutes we'll keep for an open room discussion or Q&A. With that, let me bring up what's the game plan for today. So basically, today we are going to take a look at what are the drivers for future of education. What is it that is driving the need for us to talk about future of education? And then secondly, it's we'll try to define the future of education ecosystem around 4 pillars, the 4 key pillars. We'll also try to understand the various components in each of these 4 pillars and what it means or what it takes to implement those 4 pillars. And lastly, and most importantly, we'd like to get an employer's perspective on future of education ecosystem. So that's broadly our game plan for today. And with that, please allow me to introduce our first panelist for the day today. So we have Brian on the call with us. Brian is the Vice President and General Manager of Workforce Development at Mercy College. Good morning, Brian. Thank you very much for joining us today for this conversation.
My pleasure.
So Brian, just for our audience, if you could quickly tell them about yourself and the work that you do.
Thanks, Rahul. So my background is actually as a more conventional academic, but I've been in higher ed administration and specifically workforce development arena for the last 12 or so years. And my role at Mercy College is actually to launch a new division that is really looking to innovate and to change the outlook that we have at our particular institution, but hopefully more broadly, in terms of how we as higher education professionals meet the changing market needs, both from our students and communities that we work with, but also the employers and broader labor sectors that we're engaged with. So we really see this work as engaging this very challenge that you've given to us, the future of education and the connection between education and employment. And I'll share more as our conversation evolves.
Absolutely, Brian. We'll definitely pick your brains during this conversation because it looks like, you're already into this particular domain and the higher education professionals are already talking about workforce development and connecting the dots between education and employment. So we'll look forward to your insights today. And thank you once again for joining us for this conversation today. Now, please allow me to welcome our second panelist for the day. We have Charity, Associate Dean of Academy at Wiley Edge. Good morning, Charity. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Good morning, Rahul, and thank you for having me.
So Charity, could you please briefly tell us about yourself and the work that you do for the audience knowledge?
Sure. I've been an educator for about 25 years. I started my career in K-12 education and then moved into higher education and now corporate education. At Wiley Edge, we are an emerging talent provider. We hire recent college graduates and put them through job skill training and then place them with corporate Fortune 500 clients that we work with primarily in the banking and finance industry. I've been with Wiley Edge for about a year and a half. And I am Associate Dean of Academy. Our Academy is the training arm of what we do in our hire, train, deploy model. And we train, like I said, in job skills, typically technical roles and business operations roles to place with our clients. Prior to my time at Wiley Edge, I was in higher education as well, working at University of Phoenix for about 16 years in a variety of academic roles.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Charity. So this is interesting, K-12, higher education, and then corporate education. So, you know, probably you have seen it all as to how the end-to-end system works. So thank you once again. We are pleased to have you on this panel today.
Glad to be here. Now,
please allow me to introduce our third panelist for the day, Javier, CEO of Processim Labs. Rather, I should say, Javier is joining us from Geneva. So good afternoon, Javier. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Rahul. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Javier, if you could please tell us a little bit about yourself and what cool stuff your organization does.
Absolutely. So I'm the CEO of Processim Labs, like Rahul mentioned. Our company, what we do is we develop college or university level simulation games designed specifically for mobile devices so that students can download them as mobile apps to their smartphones and or tablets. For example, our best-selling simulation is a business simulator, a virtual company that students get to manage over time and learn from the results of their managerial decisions. As well, I work as a technical consultant for several organizations like World Education at the moment in Boston in the United States, among others. And we've been with Processim Labs a little bit over 6 years now.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us today, and it's wonderful to have you on the panel. And you know, very interesting, this simulations part. I think we have a specific portion on curriculum per se, and I think we'll have some questions for you, Javier, in that particular direction.
Absolutely.
And now, please allow me to introduce Lisa. Lisa works with Brian at Mercy College, and just my apologies, we do not have her picture on the panelist slide because, you know, Lisa ensured that she joined us for this conversation, and it was some logistical issues. So anyways, good morning, Lisa. Thank you very much for joining us for this conversation today.
Hello, Rahul. Thank you for inviting me. Good to be with you.
Great. Lisa, if you don't mind, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Well, I'm delighted and privileged to be serving on Brian's team at Mercy College. There, I assist with some of these expansion efforts. I've been a provost, the vice provost, and a dean of adult and online and continuing education in colleges and universities throughout the United States. Always on this sort of periphery, this intersection between the job market and the colleges, you know, employment, employers, and university leaders. It's a very innovative and fast-moving space, and I really am pleased that that Mercy is jumping into this with a whole new vision under Brian and creating more innovative pathways and avenues for people to really become upskilled and to find good employment within our markets and our labor markets. So thank you again, and thanks for focusing on this topic today.
Thank you very much for joining us again. And I think I totally agree with you, Lisa. Never ever, I think the higher education space was so dynamic, and there's so much focus on the workforce development and connecting the dots between education and employment. So having said that, now let me kind of bring up the slide deck again. And this is where, you know, some of the drivers as to what is driving the need for this future of education, or why are we talking about this topic, or rather than talking, why are colleges like Mercy already implementing this? So some things which we could list down was first one is increasing enrollments. That's a critical thing as to increasing enrollments in colleges. Second one is definitely around enhancing learning outcomes, the student success. Third one is cutting down costs. There's been a lot of talk in the higher education segment in terms of, and probably we can say some of it was COVID triggered. The enrollment started dropping, the operational costs kept on increasing. So there is a need to cut down on the costs. And at the end of it, the roadmap for education to employment. So, and there could be multiple other drivers, but just for the discussion per se, we have put this 4 items together. And this is where I would turn back to my panelists and I would request them to share their opinions as to which of these 4 drivers are the most relevant ones in their opinion, and any particular reasons why they feel these are the most relevant ones. And maybe we'll start with you, Charity, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. While all 4 of these are important, and as I put my university academic hat on, increasing enrollments and cutting costs was always important for us. In my current work at Wiley Edge, I would say that enhancing learning outcomes for that roadmap to employment is where my focus is right now. Students need to have a clear pathway to the career of their choice, the professional growth that they can have post-university. So enhanced learning outcomes really help with that. In the work that we do at Wiley Edge, we're really focused on specific job roles to get an emerging talent, a recent graduate, their career started. And then we work on professional development to help them grow into a full career and professional pathway. Our roadmap really takes them from a technical degree or a STEM degree at university, and then does that kind of last mile training or finishing school to get them ready for their first job role. So those 2 drivers are really, I think, most relevant, especially given the costs of higher education to our students and the amount of debt that some of our students are taking on. Having a clear pathway to a great professional career is an important part of that education to career pathway.
Absolutely, Charity. And I think you rightly said, for example, see, as such, the higher education costs are pretty high. And even after getting out of the higher education system, if people cannot get a job, which means they have to spend additional money to go to a finishing school or do some additional course or certification to get placed. So that's where I think the model on which you're working, the hire, train, deploy model, that's an interesting one, and we'll come back to that later. Brian, most of these things that I've put on this slide, these are outcomes of the conversations that we have had in the past with you and Lisa, but still, I'll take this opportunity to ask you this question, that in your opinion, which of these 4 drivers are the most relevant ones?
Thank you. So, of course, the answer is an integrated solution that does this well is the secret sauce that the market is really looking for. But I will actually go with the last piece in terms of the roadmap for education to employment. We're seeing record numbers of students in the United States choosing not to pursue higher education. And there's all sorts of reasons for that, including cost, including challenges with respect to access. But one of the biggest difficulties that before us is I don't think we're giving an effective roadmap for people who are unaware of what the bumps on the roads could look like. There's a smaller, very elite segment of the educational market in the United States, and actually globally, that's well prepared and well aware of the pathway that will lead them forward and lead them to a good paying job. But increasingly, we're seeing discontent, we're seeing a disillusionment with the system as a whole. And I would say we need to reach back even further, connect with students before they begin their higher education journey, maybe even, sort of plant a seed here with charity in terms of our road to employment, to get those employers involved way before our students are graduating college, maybe even before they're even entering college, to create these pathways, to create these roadmaps. And then that will help everything else. That will force us to enhance our learning outcomes. We think that would also increase our enrollments. And if we do this right, we're certainly cutting down costs, both for ourselves and that we pass along to our students. So, I think this ecosystem that we would be talking about that really provides those pathways that could go in multiple directions, but really connect students at a very early age to the value, not just of higher education, but of skills, that skills map all along the way. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing, that there are things one can do that are still education, that can lead to good employment, and that can put them on a pathway towards continuing their education. So, I think that roadmap is critical.
Right, great point, Brian. I think what you mentioned is even before they get into the higher education system, it has to start from there. I mean, we are living in a skills-driven economy, and this is not going to change. If there's anything, this is going to become more stronger driving force, the skills economy. So I think we have to, as you mentioned, we have to map it towards those skill-driven economy. I would request in the audience that if you have any comments or preferences of any of these drivers, or if you feel there's anything more to this which is interesting, which we should talk about, please feel free to type in your comments in the chat box. And having said that, now I'll turn to Lisa. And Lisa, I think based on our previous conversations, I'm taking a guess that enhancing learning outcomes would be on top of your mind, but still I will request you to share your thoughts.
Well, I may be a spoiler here, Raul, so sorry, is that the one that I would say that perhaps is not on the list, it could be linked to the roadmap for ed to employment, is just consider how when universities align curricula more closely with the actual needs of the labor market, the innovativeness, the entrepreneurship, and the relevance that this then imbues within the academy, I think is critical. There have been, and there is currently, something of a gulf. Universities do the best they can to prepare students for what they believe they will need, while employers sometimes roll their eyes and just yawn because they find so many graduates coming to work who are sort of ill-prepared. So the ability for these two sectors to really enjoin and to partner, I think, is enhanced with the university as well, not just the labor market, being the benefactor of that roadmap to education by virtue of its own curricula being updated, being always contemporary and even futuristic.
Thank you for sharing that point. I think aligning the curriculum to the labor market, that's a very valid point, and probably this is a very good point for me to request Javier to share his thoughts. That what do you believe about this? Apart from these four, what do you believe about this fifth point, aligning the curriculum to the labor market?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that, well, of course, agreeing that they're all important to address. I believe that some can be addressed indirectly. Like, so if a student can easily see the return on their investment, it'll be easier to increase enrollments, right? If we, similar to what Brian was mentioning about reaching to students before they even join the university, if we help students get exposed to these different fields that they can get a degree on, if we help them discover their strengths and their weaknesses as well, it'll make it easier to make an informed decision on what to go to school for, right? And to make it not feel like I'm quote unquote wasting my money while I'm trying to figure this out, right? Which is, I think, sometimes a big issue when making the decision on making the investment about going for higher education or not. But definitely enhancing the learning outcomes, refining the skills that they learn as learning outcomes, and making sure that these skills align, like you were saying, with a clear path on their road from education to employment will make it easier for them for students to make these calls, which are not easy decisions, really, and in some cases, very understandably, we can see them hesitant about making such a big investment.
That's a great point. I think it's a very clear message from your end that there has to be an enablement which helps students to make informed decisions as to why they're going to school for. It's not just, in the good old days, our parents told us that it's good to be educated, get a college degree, and then probably you'll figure out what to do in the life. But I think now it has changed. It's a commodity, if you look at it, and you need to make sure you make the right decisions before you invest at a particular place. Right. So thank you once again for sharing your thoughts on this. We'll move ahead in the conversation. So this is the integrated future of education ecosystem that Brian was alluding to. And in a typical higher education space, there's more to this particular ecosystem. For example, right from the stage when a student sends in an inquiry to a college or university, the process of enrollment when it starts. And then the last pillar is when basically if they have graduated out of the college and the university, but if they want to come back for continuous learning or lifelong learning or alum relationships and those things. So those are the other two pillars on the periphery of this ecosystem, which definitely needs to be considered. But for our discussion today, we are focusing on these four pillars. So the first one is the hybrid instructional delivery model. And what do we mean actually by hybrid instructional delivery model? Is a model wherein we can accommodate students who are joining in person, virtual, totally online or totally offline. For example, using metaverse to build a virtual campus wherein students can have their digital twins attending college when they do not want to do it in person. The second part is the curriculum redesign. And this is going back to what Lisa and Javier were talking about in terms of aligning the curriculum to the labor market, and probably some of this charity is already doing at Wiley Edge. Emphasis on skills over degrees. So, why do we need finishing schools is because degrees are not sufficient or, probably not good enough to get people jobs. So that's why they are finishing schools. But the trend is moving towards emphasizing on skills over degrees. And the last one is mapping the job seekers with open opportunities. So having said that, I would, invite Brian here to, share some of his thoughts in terms of how does this ecosystem looks like or plays, or, how does it shapes up in a education system, higher education system?
Thanks, Rahul. And I want to pick up on sort of the second to last piece, or the middle pieces of this chart, the curriculum redesign connected with the skills, and really the skills that are in demand right now. And there seems to me an opportunity for those of us in higher education, whether we're on the administrative side or on the teaching side, to find ways to integrate in real time, the skills that are in demand and the skills that are changing. And then to use these, instructional models, the types of things that Javier is building, to infuse the current curriculum and actually to make those changes on the fly, rather than the years that it often takes in higher education. When Lisa was talking about the gap earlier that we often find between what goes into a degree and what employers are looking for, that's often a function of sort of the incredibly bureaucratic driven process of change inside higher education, both internally and externally. It's not simply that colleges are difficult to move on their own, but they're responsive to oversight models at the state, sometimes at the federal regulatory levels that make these things difficult. So being able to also cut through that red tape would be increasingly valuable. But if there was a way then to work with our instructors, with our faculty, to tell them and to have systems in place. So, systemic change is really important here, that says, there's a new skill. It could be a new computer language. It could be a new way of understanding supply chain logistics that is very different than we've been teaching in our curriculum. And by the way, we've got a module, right, that we can take off the shelf through a partner like Javier's company, and we throw that right into the curriculum, and we know that he's changing it in accordance with the demands of the marketplace in real time. So it's a very dynamic ecosystem that you're talking about. Yes, it might sound incredibly utopian, but the notion that we've got not only the current technological tools, but a key piece of this, which you haven't mentioned yet, is incorporating AI and machine learning to make these things more efficient. We're by no means saying you have to take the human element out of the equation, but we want to be more efficient. We want to be able to move fast, and we want to be able to keep costs down. So taking advantage of the analytics that that our edtech technology sector can bring into play, I think is incredibly valuable. And I'll pass it along.
Thank you, Brian. I think you rightly mentioned that for this ecosystem to be integrated and to work effectively and efficiently, there's a lot of data and analytics that's churning up. But data is only data, but if it can help you make decisions, if it can help you innovate, then it becomes more meaningful. And that's where, as you mentioned, artificial intelligence and machine learning can come into picture. And of course, I will agree to your point in terms of making a change in a higher education system is a pretty, lengthy process. So we need to, figure it out, a solution for that. So in fact, we'll go to Charity first, and then we'll come back to you, Javier. And then at the end, Lisa, we'll take your opinion. Charity, I specifically wanted to request that, we are talking about the labor market feeding data back into the education system so that we can redesign the curriculum, or we can, ensure that the education system is delivering to those labor market demands and needs. Is this something that you currently do in this hire, train, deploy model? And if yes, then how do you actually implement this?
Yeah, we sort of work right to left in a way within this integrated system, because we start with the conversations with our clients and what job openings and job roles, what are the open opportunities that our client team have. What are the line managers needing for technical work, for business operations? And we look at that first, and then feed that to the skills and curriculum and delivery that we need to do to have our emerging talent ready for those opportunities. Within Wiley, we also have a much broader kind of business as well. Wiley Edge is a part of the Wiley company, where we have university partnerships to provide online program management, and we have research and publishing in the publishing arm of Wiley. And so something that we're doing is bringing our clients open opportunities to some of our university partners and sharing some of the curriculum that we've created in the academy that's a very skills-based curriculum targeted to those open opportunities. We bring that to our university partners and look for opportunities where existing courses that the universities have could infuse the skills that align with the open opportunities of our clients. So Wiley Edge has been a key part of Wiley's broader strategy to connect their university partners and their publishing offerings back to the open opportunities that our clients have for emerging talent.
Thank you, Charity. So that kind of validates the part that the focus is on the skills. So understanding what the skills are required and then designing your programs accordingly. And so Javier, the things that you are doing at Processum Labs, for example, you have these simulations, right? You mentioned in one of our conversations that, it's a business simulation wherein you are actually a CEO or a CXO level decision-making person at an organization, you have a certain budget to spend, and there's a certain various things to do. So how does this maps with the skills-driven economy, and how flexible is it for you to get data from the labor market, listen to those needs that are required, and then redesign the curriculum or redefine the curriculum for a student experience?
Right. So first of all, yes, I wanted to start by agreeing with the focus is the skills, but to bring in the topic closer to home, it's not just the skill, but how we teach the skill, right? The mean through how we teach the skill to kids, to these younger generations that have shorter attention spans than ever, that are looking for instant gratification, right? That it's the videos they consume are getting shorter and shorter. They're rarely reading. So it's also that it's the skill. Yes, it's important and have it aligned with the needs of corporate and the job market. But of course, we need them paying attention. We need them actually learning the skill that we're trying to teach them, right? And that's where I think that software like the one we developed comes in very handy. It's that the curriculum itself, again, not just the topic, but how we teach it. We are firm believers in active learning, in having the students not just be passively looking at the board or at the Zoom call, right? But we want them actually put into practice what they're learning, making mistakes, learning from those mistakes, and it's a complete different approach and a complete different set of results. And to your question, Rahul, about the data, that's one of the beauties about software-based solutions, right? We can basically keep records of whatever we want, of course, with privacy and all of those concerns in mind, but performance-wise, even if it's anonymized data, we can see where the students, how fast they're making decisions. One of the things that I like about the simulation in particular that you were talking about is it's even like a window to the personality of the students. We see how aggressive they make decisions, right? Some students on day one, they get a loan, a big loan, and really invest all that capital really fast. Some other students are even more cautious, more passive, and they let a couple of days of the simulation or hours in the simulation to pass by before they start making decisions. And we believe that this is also very useful information for employers, right? Are you looking for a leadership role? Are you not? So this is, and actually corporations that are even starting to use our simulations even as recruitment tools, right? But we have this information available since they are getting their degrees, right? So we can give them a more complete profile than just the small test that they have their the current and future employees playing the simulation for a couple of hours during recruitment, right? We have this history of decisions that this student has made throughout his or her career with all of the data that we are able to collect from our simulation. So this is, there's a lot of potential regarding to your point about the usage of data to determine learning results and to determine other aspects, like I was telling you about the personality even of the students, some soft skills like leadership, like teamwork, other different aspects that we can measure and address.
This is so very interesting. I mean, in a span of probably less than 2 minutes, you have opened up so many windows for us. I'll probably pick on 2 or 3 of them. I think you mentioned it's not just about the skills that we teach, but how we teach those skills. That's really important. I think we as educators and learning and development professionals should make a note of it. The second point that you made around, these simulations are a window to the personality of an individual. So, sorry, I'm just imagining a scenario wherein a particular job board, an applicant tracking system is integrated with, a solution like yours. And the applicant tracking system, the user has to go through that simulation, and then it shows the personality traits of that learner. For example, how aggressive is that person in decision making? So organizations probably who are looking for hyper growth, would need a different type of learning audience. Just
risk takers, perhaps.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Risk takers. I mean, so those kind of, so it kind of ties down to the entire system. And yeah, instant gratification, attention span, that brings me to a point that, for example, uh, in the days of TikTok, the videos are becoming 30 seconds and 1 minute. So I really wanted to thank our audience who have been here with us for the last 35 odd minutes. And if any one of you feel that you are losing attention, please give us a thumbs up. We'll try to increase the tempo of the conversation. So now coming back to our discussion point, Lisa, we would like your opinion on this integrated future of education ecosystem. But I'll also want you to reflect or share your views on the point that Javier mentioned around active learning versus passive learning. So is the current education system designed for active learning or passive learning, or where does it stand?
I think all of our panelists, as I hear these excellent points being made, are really highlighting that higher ed, for all of its attempts to innovate, and certainly distance ed has been a recent innovation, still struggles, right? Javier is talking really about almost the personalized adaptive learning formats where, the learning can be accommodated to the learning style of the student, of the individual. That's hugely exciting, but no, it's not really something that colleges and universities have mastered or are mastering. They've begun. There are pockets. Typically, it's ensuing in continuing and adult education where it's more non-traditional. But I really appreciated Charity's point that she does backward design. She starts with the goals and the skills that are required and then designs the course from there. And certainly Brian talking about just-in-time responses. Another thing that universities and colleges traditionally, that's not a priority. The priority is safeguarding sort of the tabernacle of established outcomes for each field and preserving them over time in a kind of a sanctified way. Tradition is very important in higher ed and things don't change. But I think that what you're seeing is the population and the consumer really driving disruptive innovation and change. And so I do feel that it's really important, as Javier brought up, that we are living through a digital age. And if we ignore the fact that people are learning visually and digitally, we're going to lose the pedagogy and lose the student, ultimately, because we're not really paying attention to the contemporary changes in our society. And I do think that there are some leaders in higher ed that are really catching on. And I think under Brian's leadership at Mercy, we're seeing this occur, not only the division that he oversees implementing these changes, but those changes will again come back and inform changes within the rest of the college. And I think that is so important, that that's what we need: grassroots, transformative leadership throughout the higher ed sector. I hope I answered your question, Rahul.
Oh, absolutely. You gave me more than what I wanted. So I totally agree with you in terms of what you mentioned, the work that Charity is doing, the backwards design process. I think that's the need of the hour. And I'm so glad that in this room, we already have pioneers in this space who are already doing this. Probably the only thing that Charity could, if there's anything to make it more efficient and more, faster, I think the way to synthesize data and make sense out of it, probably a layer of artificial intelligence or machine learning. And as Brian said, AI and ML is not here to replace the human part. It's actually a supplement to the human part. So it will save time. So whatever you can do X things in an hour with help of AI, you can probably do X plus Y things in an hour. So that's kind of the thought process. And and yeah, just safeguarding those higher education traditions, incredibly bureaucratic. It seems like we are spilling some beans here today on the higher education segment. But yes, I think it's good to call a spade a spade. It's time for all of us to acknowledge and accept that and look for the upcoming changes. And we do have in the attendees today as well, there are quite a few professional acquaintances and friends of ours who believe in this thought process. And I'm sure at some point or the other, they will bring in their thoughts in this conversation. All right, so we will move ahead to the next part. So now we've kind of broadly made a consensus that, okay, this is something which is required. This might not be the complete picture. Things like this take time to evolve. But yes, some portions of this, some components of this is required. But the key is that we mostly agreed upon redesigning the curriculum by bringing in information back from the labor market, and to ensure that that redesigned curriculum leads to active learning and helps the students in their progress. Now comes the tricky part in terms of, okay, this is good, this sounds very good, this can do wonders, but how do we go about doing this? So yes, definitely it's not an easy lift, and it's not something which can be done in a span of a month or two. It will require a lot of decision making through different layers, and it will require a lot of commitment to this. But yes, there are a few starting points which we can look at. This ecosystem that we spoke about. Now, just imagine for this ecosystem how it looks like. So there's a lead management system. Then there is a learning management system. Then there is a student information system. Then there is a bunch of administrative systems which track multiple things about a student, their tuition debts or fee, or their progress and academic records and all those things. And then the last point is there's probably a job board or an applicant tracking system which allows them to apply for a job or get placed. And there's an talent relationship management system. Now, at every point of these systems, there's a lot of data that's getting generated. And coming back to Brian's point, wherein he told me in one of my conversations that, when a student enters into a lead management system as an inquiry, that's the time we have to start setting up for his or her success. So how do we ensure that? Which means there has to be a significant amount of data that flows through these various systems, and these systems talk to each other. And that's where we are saying one of the key things to consider for implementing the future of education ecosystem is the ease of integration. These systems have to talk to each other. So the fundamental operating line is either you're building systems or you're buying systems. One of the key points that we have to check off is they have to be integration ready products. They should be able to talk to each other. There should be data interoperability for ease of working. And then using integration solution accelerators. So every time a new system comes into place, you don't have to start from scratch or reinvent the wheel. There has to be some sort of boilerplate which can connect these systems. The second aspect is cost effectiveness. And cost effectiveness is key when you're implementing a turnkey solution like this. I think one of the suggestions here could be is that reduce spend on subscriptions. You take any higher education system, any university system, or any corporate enterprise system. There are a bunch of applications for which we have subscriptions to. I think just at our organization in Harbinger, there's one system where we mark our attendance. There's one system where we apply for leaves. There's one system where our performance management gets recorded. And we pay a good amount of money every year for every employee, every individual as subscriptions. So we need to figure out what actually do we need in terms of subscriptions. And that's where we have to make smart buy versus build decisions. If you buy, you'll end up subscribing. But yes, there are things which you need to subscribe to, but not everything to. And if you build, there might not be subscription. There's a one-time investment. And what these smart buy versus build decisions also does is it allows you to automate workflows to reduce time spent. So there has to be a good amount of automation in the system. If everything has to be done manually, that's a huge lift. And the last one is quick implementation. The cost of building or buying or subscribing to a system is one, but a bigger part of that cost is the implementation part, which never gets recorded. How much do you spend in the implementation part? There's so many hours and efforts that you spend into. So some things for us to consider over here is leverage open source solutions wherever it's possible. Build on low code, no code platforms so that you don't have to have very heavy engineering lifts when you're implementing these solutions. And again, using solution accelerators. So I will just take a pause here, and probably I'll request Charity to share her thoughts in terms of what do you feel, Charity, about this? Does this kinds of addresses some of the pertinent challenges or questions that will come up when we present a future of education system concept to someone?
Yeah, there's a couple things that come to mind on the ease of integration side, being part of education or integration standards within education and within our academy at Wiley Edge. We use LTI integration for our learning tools, and we use REST APIs and similar APIs for integrating tools within both our educational technology and in our operational technology. The other area in cost effective that I would probably add to this list is it's kind of a buy versus build decision, but in the area of learning content, learning simulations, learning resources, you can curate content either from within your organization. Within Wiley, we have access to the publishing arm of our company, so we can curate from within our company, and we can curate from partners. So we curate a lot of material. We haven't worked with Javier yet, but we've worked with some simulations. We've worked with a variety of VR and AR training. So we look for opportunities in the buy versus build decision. We look for that in curriculum as well, to curate material that's current and aligned to the job roles that we're training. So those are two areas where we're really focused: the ease of integration in our learning tools and in our operational tools, and the ability to curate content instead of building all of the content from scratch. And then the last thing I would say on the implementation side is we're trying to implement the education that we provide in our training academy. We try to implement that in a manner that simulates the job, the job site. So our software developer trainees are doing daily stand-ups with their instructor. Their instructor is a professional software developer who has been a lead developer, has been in management within a development team. They come to us as instructors, and they run their class in a similar manner to a software dev team, where they're doing daily stand-ups, they're doing job-related work, working on projects, solving problems with their software solutions in a similar manner that they would on the job. So when we think about implementing the future of education within Wiley Edge, we're thinking about training that mirrors the workplace, assessments and work product that they do in the academy that mirrors the types of work product that they would do on the job. So they have the opportunity to essentially assemble a portfolio of software solutions, a portfolio of business operational solutions or presentations, because they're simulating or they're doing job related work during training that then they carry over into their job role.
Thank you. This is definitely very insightful. I must say one thing that Charity, you are at a slightly advantageous position because you have Wiley as your parent organization, who has a huge catalog of courses. But yes, you rightly said, even in the content space, there's this smart buy versus build decisions. And even at Harbinger, we have multiple solution accelerators that help you bring in automation to a certain extent when it comes to curating or developing new content. So definitely that's definitely a very interesting aspect of it. And yes, LTI, REST APIs, these are some of the common standards in the integration space. I think at this point, I would like to invite Javier to share his thoughts in terms of, does any of these questions come across to you when you have to implement the simulations based courses at any of these colleges or universities?
Yes, absolutely. But before that, I just want to mention that, Charity, that's really cool what you mentioned about how your students, your software development students, do their daily stand-up meetings and whatnot. It's so common that they would just be thought what a stand-up meeting is, and then now they know what it is, but it's definitely not the same as I've been doing that for the past 2 semesters. That's actual experience that's so useful for their future employees. So kudos to that. It's really, really cool. Now, Rahul, to your question, yes, for a very easy example, the first thing that came to mind is whenever we work with a university that mentions that our simulations need to be sold through their bookstore program, for example. So that's an integration just there that we need to work with, because we sell directly to our website, but we do work with universities. But I remember the first time that was requested for us a couple of years ago, like when we were a much smaller startup back then. There's a lot of learning on our end and whatnot, but we really appreciated the universities that took the time, that gave us the shot, took the time to explain to us what was needed. But we, of course, understand, and to these key things to consider, it's so interesting how it's so different depending on the institution, their size, their budgets, many other factors, right? Their current systems, how old they are, how easy it is to integrate. So the decision is very case to case, sadly, in a way, right? Yes, so that's the first example that came to mind: integration with the university local bookstore. Some things that we hadn't considered until we were first faced with this type of issues. But also, I just wanted to highlight that there is a bunch of very, very good companies out there in different sizes and stages in their life cycle, right? From small startups to more consolidated companies that are struggling to get noticed even, right? But they have such great solutions. So I would encourage a university or institution considering to going through this process, right? To just look out and contact their local edtech community or the local edtech expert, right? Because they might know of a tool that does just what they need. Of course, depending on their stage in the life cycle, there's certain risks, which are, of course, understandable. But I believe that universities and the decision makers will be shocked with what's out there already in terms of smart, elegant, easy to use, easy to integrate solutions that are available for them. Of course, there's not a solution for everything, but contact the community. You'll likely find someone that can even help you with that, or just finding it, like I said.
You're absolutely right, and I think this is what I personally love about edtech. It's about a community. People are so open in sharing their experiences and helping each other, and solving challenge problems for each other. So you rightly said, I mean, just tap into your community and you'll get something or the other to work around. And I definitely agree with your point regarding the stand-up meetings. For example, that's kind of a key finishing school thing, that you don't have to, you've onboarded a new Java engineer and you don't have to tell that engineer that what are you expected to do in a stand-up meeting, because they have done it as part of their education process. Before we go to Lisa and Brian, we have a question from the audience. I'll just read out the question, and probably Charity will need your help to answer this question. The question is, there has been mention of finishing school to teach soft skills to recent college graduates. Do you have resources about these institutions or programs?
So for Wiley Edge, we run that in-house. That's part of our training academy. We colloquially call that finishing school because we're not a formal academic institution. We're an internal corporate training type of entity. But because we're working with that emerging talent space, we think of almost our academy as the last mile between their degree that they've earned at university and their job role with our client. So a finishing school is kind of our colloquial term for that. But the idea is to have a job-focused training that leads them through the job skills training that they need in a manner that is most like the workplace that they're going to join. So our business operations trainees are giving presentations as they would to a managing director of a bank. Our software developers are doing the daily stand-ups and the software development projects to solve a business problem or a software problem, and our service desk and production support, software support trainees are doing, they're handling tickets and they're escalating issues, and they're actually using the systems that they would use on the job, something like Jira, to track incidents within a software issue. So we're trying to do a job skills training that builds on what they learned from their degree, but is focused on the day-to-day work that they'll experience when they hit the job.
Thank you.
I will say I'm not aware of a lot of programs that do that. We have a few competitors in the hire, train, deploy space. I won't give them a shout out today, but that's something that we do in-house, because I don't know of a lot of finishing schools that would do that independent of a specific job placement or training type placement.
Thank you, Patty, for sharing your thoughts. Lisa, will request your thoughts on this. What do you feel about this? Key things to consider when it comes to implementing this.
Well, in the short time that's remaining, I think we tie up shortly, is that it's not only about the tools. In many ways, these elegant technology tools have really exceeded the sector's ability or knowledgeability about using them. So they're so impressive, and there's so much that can be done, and yet there needs to be a primer or maybe a training program so that university leaders can have the full understanding of the best way to optimize these tools and to design systems that utilize them successfully to support optimal learning. So I think that the tools, again, have exceeded the user in the case of higher ed, and that we need to come around and give more thought to more intentionally designing our academies to make the best use of these marvelous tools.
Thank you, Lisa. And Brian, for example, if someone was to give you this pitch that, okay, we understand there are certain challenges when it comes to implementing this future of education ecosystem, but these are the key things that we will take care of. Would it convince you, or would you have more suggestions or advice to this?
Well, if you had a truly integrated solution that did all these things, sure, it would convince me that there is a market for it. To build a little bit on what Lisa said, and those of us who's been operating in higher education, I think, see the strange disconnect where we talk about and actually teach innovation and entrepreneurship. We will give classes in business on agile, lean leadership, and management and operation. But then if you look at how most colleges and universities actually operate, nobody is taking this advice to heart. So, it's sort of a classic, we're telling people to do what we say and not what we do. And what you're talking about, particularly on the systems side, one of the challenges we have in higher ed is we operate on very heavy fixed costs. One of the largest pieces being faculty, which is a fixed cost that's hard to change, but systems as well. And then they become legacy systems that are hard to change. Right. And so as much as you can come with your new model and say, isn't this wonderful? I'll say, yeah, but I'm locked into my SIS for 7 years, and I'm locked into my CRM for another 5 years, my LMS, OPM, and then a different 10 years. So come back to me in 15 years when I'm out of these contracts, and maybe we can have a conversation about it. And that's an exaggeration, to be sure. But I think there's an opportunity to get people to think how they could behave a little more agilely. If some of the people that Javier are talking about, especially the up and coming entrepreneurs in this space who haven't yet been consolidated, are willing to operate on a lean basis. One of my operating principles is, if you have confidence in your product, you're not going to lock me in for a long time, because you're going to show me quickly how valuable it is, and then I'll want to be locked in for a long time. But you're going to have to keep proving yourself, right? You're going to have to keep demonstrating quality. And the same thing should be our attitude towards our students, right? Again, we in higher education think we've got a monopoly. To go back to how you started the conversation on skills versus degrees, we're starting to see that shift in the marketplace, where if we can't deliver on the skills, or even the soft skills that Charity is talking about, why are they going to her? Because they're not getting it out of college. right? The colleges aren't delivering on what they're supposed to in this regard. So the market is also going to behave that way with respect to the services that we provide, just as I would like to operate with respect to the services that our edtech community is providing. And that means things move very fast, right? And we have to be nimble. We have to be lean. Open source models, I think, have to be implemented on broader scale. And certainly those integrations have to be easy and affordable. But if we can do all that, I think it's a wonderful way to look at the future.
Thank you, Brian. I think that's a wonderful message to the edtech community, and there's no value add that I can do to what you said, Brian. I think you had summarized it well for all of us, and I think I'll just call out one interesting thing that you mentioned, and Javier, Brian said that entrepreneurs who have not been consolidated. So that's a unique position to be in which you are. And I think organizations like yours, entrepreneurs like yours can kind of drive a lot of this nimbleness and agility that Brian was referring to. And I'm sure you're already doing that. But yes, we as an edtech community, we would look up to leaders like you to drive some of that. Right. So we are just coming to the close of the presentation. I will hand it over to Harsha from here, and probably will take another 5 to 7 minutes to conclude this discussion. And right. So Harsha, over to you from here.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you so much, panelists. I actually had a very great time listening to all of you, and I'm very lucky because I guess coming from that generation, the millennials, looking at the way the system is changing is very, very, very enthusiasm kind of energy I'm getting, that when I look back and I now see the things changing, it's giving me the goosebumps that yes, something new is coming, and we'll get some talented people without struggling much into the education space. So thank you so much for making such changes to the system and having the time available for us to join us for the session. With this, I will quickly move to a small, a couple of minute talks about Harbinger Group. So Harbinger Group is a global provider of software and product and services established in the year 1990. So it's been 30 years we are in the business, and we have been serving clients from across the globe, from North America, Europe, UK, Asia, Pacific, and Middle East. Overall, as an organization, we are more than 800 plus odd individuals spread across India and US. At a company level, we are bifurcated or divided into 3 groups, that is Harbinger Systems, wherein we talk about product engineering services, focusing on HR tech, health tech, ed tech domains. Then we have Harbinger Knowledge Products, wherein we have products for teaching professionals and learning development professionals, to name a few. Raptivity, it's an rapid interactivity builder tool. Then we have Quillians. This is one of its unique kind AI-enabled assessment tool to help educators generate some assessments with quick 4 to 5 steps and get the assessments ready for the students. Then we have Harbinger Interactive Learning, which is a custom content development arm of Harbinger, where we focus on online learning, content transformation, modernization services, and all. So this in a nutshell about Harbinger Group. If I would like to just ask to all the audiences and to panelists, if you like to have more information, and if you have questions, please feel free to drop in a line, and I will share some email IDs and other information post that with you all. With that, if you all are okay, we'll just take a couple of minutes. If anyone has a question for the panel, or if you have any brief thing to discuss, please drop a line, and the Q&A is also open. All right. So if there are questions, as we are sitting on time, I may direct it to the panelists offline, or will share it with the audiences likewise. Basis that, I'll just conclude the discussion, and I'm very happy. I cannot control, like you can see on my face, that thank you so much, Rahul, and to all the panelists for the wonderful session. And while we were discussing, I actually had a quick chat with Lisa as well, discussing on how the panel discussion went and all. So there are some wow factors also that came in which is gonna help the new generation in a very drastic way in terms of how the skillings gap are being fulfilled. So I'm very happy on that. I am totally going, not some, with a lot of food for thought today. And I would like to thank the viewers also who are joining us via Zoom or through LinkedIn. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for spending time. As Rahul mentioned that in the era of TikTok and Reels, having you guys for an hour is such a change that we are actually adding some value to this. In the meanwhile, if you guys have any question, please feel free to drop in the line. Till then, thank you so much. Take care and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye.